Right, so today we're going to be going through watercolour portrait, and we're going to be working on this project that I've just finished off to show you how we're going to do it. Now, first of all, obviously you're going to need your reference image, this one by Moustache. I apologise if I pronounced that completely wrong, but the reference is below, and this is a royalty-free image from Pexels, so it's a brilliant resource for you to play around with. Then you're going to need your 300 GSM watercolour paper, which I've got here, and obviously some watercolours. I'm using pans for this because it's quite small, tight areas of painting, so pans are good for it. You don't have to mix up huge quantities. The tubes are better for the watercolour. So I've got some pans, I've got some water, I've got some watercolour brushes, and I've got some tissue to blot up my errors as I go along, which is typical of watercolours. Now, let's get going. First of all, let's do the drawing. Right everyone, we're going to be working on a watercolour portrait this morning. I've got my reference picture over here to my left. Now a lot of you are thinking probably, why am I choosing this? I sent out some really pretty ones. I thought the skin colours are particularly interesting here, and the shadow works rather lovely on the face. So it'll be great to work in watercolour. Now the other thing is you've got a great character. Look at those eyes looking out. So an amazing character, lots of tones, lots of wrinkles to give you contour directions when you're drawing. It'll make life a lot more easier, and just give you an artwork that's fascinating to work on. Okay, now before we can get on to doing the watercolour, you need to do the drawing. Some artists don't draw, they'll just go straight into the watercolours and they'll build it up and they'll be beautiful. But because you're students, I think we probably should take it easier, and we'll work with the drawing to start off with. Now, before you go on to the drawing, which should be pencil onto like 300 GSM watercolour paper, I just want to work through the proportions of this image and how to transfer it over onto your piece of paper, because I thought it might make life a bit easier for you. Now, first of all, you can see that I've put these spots on the reference image. Those over there. These are to look at the relationship of the width to the height, okay? And to get a feel, you'll find sometimes when you're drawing that you can feel with the direction of your pencil going over the subject much better than you can see accurately the shape that you want to generate. So it's always nice to run your hand just imaginatively over the reference image to get a feel for the shape that you want to generate. Now, it's quite a long oval shape, you can see here. So I've got my piece of paper. This is just for drawing to show you, so it's nice and strong. I'm doing it in biro. You should not be doing it in biro, you should be doing it in pencil. But you should be holding the end of your pencil. And you can see here, I'm just doing a few lines to get a feel for that oval shape. Now I'm going a bit darker than you should, because I want you to be able to see it nice and crisp on the camera. Once I've got that, then I'm looking at the line of symmetry which runs through the face. Now, again, I'm drawing it on the reference image. You do not have to draw it on the reference image, but sometimes it is handy because you can see where you get a slope, so you can see the forehead, it's sloping around. It should be going straight through the middle of the bow of the nose, straight through the centre of the nose, through the bow of the lips, down through the centre of the chin. And because the head is curved, you'll find that it's got a slight angle on it. So you can see here that there's more to the left of the fat side of the face than to the right. If I measure it, so if I take my fingers, I go 1, 2, it's nearly a third, just shy of a third. So I'm going to do it by eye, but you could get your fingers and you go 1, 2. Yeah, okay, actually it needs to shimmy over there a little bit more. Right, so I'm going to get my line through there. My line's bowing at the top, so I've got my line going through the centre of the face. The next line you're looking at getting is your eye line, and again it can be handy to run it through because you might find that you've got a little bit of a curve, which I have here. Really, that goes, you see that going up, because where the ear hits the side of the head should be roughly on the eye line, so you get a little bit of a curve here. Now that eye line is not halfway down the head. If it was halfway down the head, it'd be here. Okay, so it's got a much higher eye line than we'd normally go for. If anything, if I half the head, and I'm doing it by eye, that's halfway up my head, okay, halfway up my line of symmetry, you can see that the eye line should be sitting a little bit higher than that. So if I halfway my head, about there, I can see that my eye line should be sitting up here and it wrapping a little bit higher to this left hand side. Now let's have a look at the size of the eyes. So if I go on here and I'm going from the edge to edge of eye, if I take that measurement, and I'm using the biro and my fingernail, just in case you're wondering what I'm doing, and I'm moving it across. So this gap here is actually a little bit longer than that eye length. And it's because you're seeing less on the right hand side and more on the left hand side of the portrait. So let's have a look at putting an eye in here. So we're going to do an eye length of about that kind of size. Looks about right to me. Then if I move it across, if I do it again, that should be the centre of the eye. Do it again, should be the edge of the head. And that's where, let me just check that measurement, that should be hitting the ear. So I've got little points along there, haven't I, just to check it out. Now let's look at the nose. The best way of doing this, a lot of the time they'll say you half the top of the head to the chin to get the eye line, which we haven't done because we know our eye line's higher. Then you half the eye line to the chin to get the nose. Let's see if that works. That's actually not bad. So if you're looking at the bottom of the chin to the eye line and you half it, you should be getting roughly the base of the nose. So that means I've got to look at this line, I've got to half it. Okay, this should be that line, because looking at the overall relationship, finding halfway up from the eye to the chin line, and that gives us where the bottom of our nose should be. Now the other thing is I'm going to draw an alignment line. Now alignment lines are straight, they go vertical or horizontal. If you draw an alignment line up, you're looking at what sits in the same position. So I can see the edge of the nose roughly is in line with the eye. If I draw that line there, I know that the edge of the nose, because remember that's sitting at the base, the edge of the nose is going to be about roughly there. So there's a lot of dot to dot here we're kind of building up to. Now if I draw this alignment line, you can see that's slightly past it, but it does start the eye. So if we say that the eye is going to be coming in here, and I draw an alignment line straight down, that should be hitting the side there of that nostril. Easy, easy peasy. So let's look at putting these in. Let me draft in an eye, roughly here. I've got another eye here, so that's going to be the centre, that's going to be about the edge of that eye, and I could measure it if I wanted to, but I'm just keeping things real simple. You can see that this eye, because it's nearer the camera, is bigger than this eye, which is slightly being cut off by the bow of the nose. Then let's put in the nose shape, which should be roughly like so. Let's bring that up over there. Let's bring that bow up there. And we've got our eyes and our nose. Okay. We also have the idea of where our ears start. So you can see that ear starting here. And you can see the ear just coming in to the side of the nose. So the bottom of my ear should be coming in here. Okay, and the bottom of the ear coming in here. Then let's draw out our face, our mouth. A lot of the time with these kind of portraits, it's easy to get the laughter lines in. So you might find that by putting that in, looking at where that sits in relationship to the eye, so you see I'm doing another vertical line up, which is running towards the end. That should be giving me my mouth shape. Now let's look at where the mouth goes, because the mouth is here. Now normally again you would half the nose to the chin to find the mouth. It usually does go through the bottom of the lip. Let's just have a look at that measurement, which it does. So if I half here, so again I'm looking at the relationship of the nose line to the chin. I'm halving it to find this point, which is going through the bottom of the lip. So you've got the moustache, which is actually sitting further up the face. Then let's get that line in here. We've got our moustache coming over here. We could look at an alignment line to see where it finishes, kind of just shy to the edge of the eye. And we've got this one poking out and around, like so. So we're getting our face, we're getting our features in. Everything hopefully is in the right place. Let's look at putting these eyebrows in. So if I draw a horizontal guideline there, I'm going to take my eye and I'm going to turn that measurement 90 degrees. So I'm basically taking that measurement and flipping it around to find the relationship of how high it is. That means my eyebrows, because you can see there, the eyebrow should be starting around here, but it goes up higher. So I'm going to be putting in a line there to give me my eyebrow shape. Then again I'm going to do this here. So this eyebrow is starting a little bit higher than that eyebrow. It's coming up and then hooking down around the eye. Then once I've got that, I can start building up my face shape. So let's look, and we're looking at the shapes. So you can see that curved shape of the top of the jaw and the cheekbone. Coming up into the brow, going up into the forehead. We've got this section coming down, and because of his age and his sex, he's getting a flatter chin. Square things off to make it more masculine looking. Okay, let's bring this up over here. We've got the jaw, which is coming into the ear, so let's bring that down like that. Coming up, and then we've got our ear sitting over here. Just have our ear sitting over here. We've got our hairline coming in a little bit higher, then I'll bring that in down there with the sideburns. And shape our head a little bit more refined. And maybe bring that out a bit. And we've got our ear sitting here and some hair. And before you know it, can you see here how he's coming along? Okay, not perfect, but he's got the bare bones there, which is what we're looking for. Then you can start refining it. So you put down your hair, you could put down your shirts, because it's always good to have a little bit of detail tucking in around the neck, just to give it a little bit of character and life. Let's bring that up down the ear. And of course you've got to work up the ear shape. Now again, you could measure this out and double check that the proportions are correct, or you can just draw a little bit by eye. Don't get too bogged down in checking all the proportions all the time. You'll lose the natural artistic flair that you're trying to develop, and also getting your eye in so that you become better at drawing. Okay, and then obviously you need to refine the shape of these eyes, because these are very almond-esque. They were just to initially get the basics in. Once you've got the basics, then you're looking at putting in the lids, and that will give you the character of the face as well. You can see a little bit of shadow coming up down his nose. Oh, just tuck that in, and you can see the cheeks. So the shadow is going to be built up in a little while. And you've got a little bit of shadow underneath the eyes. You've got some shadow coming in over here with the nose, and so on. Right, so that gives you some basic ideas of how to build up the face in your drawing proportions and get a lifelike representation. Once you've done that, you should end up with a nice pencil drawing. Now, mine is a little bit darker than yours should be, but it gives you the idea of where you should be going with it. So a very linear form, because you don't need any tone, you're going to build that all up with colour. Once you've got that drawing ready, then you need to start painting. Okay, so I've got my drawing sorted now. I've got some pans of colours over here. Personally, with skin tones, I like to work with the pans. Normally the tubes are used for big washes, which I don't really have in such a tight portrait. I've got a variety of watercolour brushes over there. I've got a pot of clean water and I have a tissue. Always have a tissue. If you can make any errors, you can use a tissue to blow it off quickly, and it'll just make your life a lot easier. Obviously I have my reference image over here. Now I'm looking at this reference image and how I'm going to start this off. First of all, I'm going to lay down like the mid-tones. So this is a general tonage across the face with a little bit of shadow work, because I can bleed them into those mid-tones to give it a very soft, subtle appearance. For the mid-tones, you're ultimately looking at using an orange. Some people will use a cadmium orange. I used like my own mix, so I generally like a yellow ochre with a cadmium red to generate a very soft, pale, washed out orange, obviously diluted with water. Once I've got that on the go, I'll use a lilac, ultimately, a violet, it depends what you want to do, but generally a purple works very well. Now remember that if you're mixing a purple in with a yellow, you're using complementary colour combinations. It'll give you a really nice shadow, especially certain lilacs with certain yellows. You might find that there's a bit of trial and error in the early days, but you'll get a knack after a while of experimentation. Just have a piece of paper, do a bit of kind of colour mixing, paint it on and see which looks best. So let's get going. I'm going to use some yellow ochre, and then I'm going to grab some cadmium reds, and you can see it going orangey. Now if you applied this, he's going to look a little bit like David Dickinson. You do need to add some water just to dilute it down and soften out the shade. Always have a spare piece of paper just to try it on to check that you're happy with the colour. Now I'm not quite happy with that, it looks still too orangey for my liking, so I'm going to add a little bit more red into it just to try and see if I can pink it up a little bit more. That looks better, that's a better colour. Okay, so I've got my mix there. Then I'm going to use a purple. This is a dioxide violet. I'm just going to have it over there. And once I've done this, I'm going to mix a little bit into that to get my shadow shade. But I obviously don't want to do it at this stage because it's going to cross-contaminate all the colour that I need to lay down. So, just wash my brush. Pick up a little bit of pigment. I don't want to go anywhere that's going to be white. Some people use masking fluid such as hair, but because this is such a small portrait, I don't really think it needs it personally. I'm going to add a little bit of water just to smooth out the pigment onto the softer areas of light on the skin, which is more to this right hand side, and then lift in a little bit more pigment where it's a bit stronger. Obviously I'm not going to be painting in the eyes, and I'm trying to paint around the eyebrow because it's white, and the sideburns. Obviously I'm not going to paint the moustache either. I'll keep my brush strokes fairly loose. Now if I pick up a little bit of the lilac and add that in to my orange shade, or I can add the orange shade to the lilac, I get a plummy tone, which is rather nice to work in for areas where I want the shadow to be built later on. Be careful about the angle of your sketchbook. You can see I'm getting a little bit of run at this moment because my sketchbook is at an angle. You may want to flatten down the angle that you're working on to prevent any kind of accidents. This here, make it as soft and gentle as possible, and that looks pretty good. Now while that's drying, let's put in a little bit of colour around things, because ultimately colours will look different when they're placed next to each other. First of all, you've got this bluey, baby blue. I'm just going to take a cobalt, dilute that down, and let's bring that in. Be careful, anywhere that's wet, if you put the cobalt right next to the ear while it's wet, it's all going to bleed, so don't do it. Leave a little bit of space between the two. You could always take a bit of cobalt if you want in certain places so you can see the shadow and build up a deeper level of colour. A bit more darker. So again, I might take a little bit of that purple, add that in with the blue, and because we used the purple on the face, it's all about colours bouncing off and shadow and highlights. It'll tie the picture together. Let's put in a little bit of colour around the edge. Now this looks kind of yellow ochre-y to me, which is quite nice because we used that yellow ochre in the skin. So again, we're tying it in. I'm going to keep it very pale and washed out. Finding that it's a little bit too harsh, you can always take a tissue and just pat it out so it's a little bit more of a diluted, softer tone. Right, well, the skin's still a bit wet, but you know, we've got some nice bleeds on there. I'm just going to bring in a base colour for the eyes, which are this beautiful green. I'm going to use a cadmium yellow. And an ultramarine blue. A very diluted, gentle green. Just patchwork that in softly for the eye shade. So obviously it's going to be worked up a lot more. Now we've got this colour down here. Normally a yellow ochre mixed in with that will give you a more of an earthier tone of green, which is more suitable for this top. Okay. Right, so at this stage you need to just allow everything to dry and settle down. It's probably only going to take 5-10 minutes because it's watercolour, so it's fairly quick, but it just needs to dry, and then we're going to go in and we're going to start building up the detail and giving him his real character. I'll see you in a moment. Okay, so we've got this, it's been a few, like 10 minutes drying off. Now it's going to be about building up a bit of detail. Okay, because we've got like the base, mid-tones down and shadows, then we've got to work them up a little bit more. So I would downsize your brush to something that feels a little bit more comfortable. So try to look at what I've got, what sizes. Generally with portraits, filberts are quite nice because they'll give you a softer edge brush mark. Filberts are when you have the side curve in. Okay, so it's not a pointed head. That's a pointed head brush. That's a flat head, so you can see it's really crisp. And that's a filbert. Right, so I'm going to be using a filbert for putting in a little bit more tone, and then I've got a pointed head brush just to start working up some detail. Around this stage, sometimes it can be handy to work the eyes, the nose and the mouth area, and then to work the skin tones up into that, because it'll change. And you're kind of judging how deeper tone, how dark you want that tone to be in relationship to what else is going on. So let's work around this eye over here. Okay, it's got like a slight greeny grey tone. Okay, that's a little bit wet, I can't work that too much. So let's come down and let's do the nose where that dries and build up some shadowy tones. Now you can do shadow tones in a few different ways. I'm going to use a bigger fill book just to get this tone out, so I find it a lot easier that way. I've got some burnt umber, which I'm going to add crimson red, a little bit of water, and just gently smooth it out so it throws up the lighter tone. Right, so that's it. Use the shadows to keep building up the observations of light and dark across the head. Right, now it's going to be going back and doing some details. So with the eyes, let's sort out the white of the eyes because they're a little bit too white. Normally you always have like a slight creamy tone, so again take your yellow ochre but add a bit of cadmium red into it to make it go pinky. Add a lot of water. Check it on your piece of paper if you're a little bit concerned that it's not quite right. It's better. Add a little bit in. Not too much or he's going to end up looking like he's got orange eyes. Very diluted areas of pigment that are seriously subtle. And while I've got that there, just going to put in a few areas where it's a little bit more stronger, a little bit more maybe fine and refined with the detail using the smaller brush. Right, so just gone round there, usually a bit of shadow work, just playing around with it, messing around with that background. Let's just throw in a little bit of a very diluted version of that shadow work just in the background to throw him forward a little bit because it's very light in that background. So let's take some of that out and just cool it down, knock it back into the recesses of the background. And there you go, you've got a relatively quick little watercolour you can play around with. Obviously you can build up more skin tones, be more accurate, have finer brushwork. This is just a taster to get you into it, but it's a nice handling of the medium. I'll see you later. Get out there, practice painting, and you'll get much better. Practice makes perfect. I'm afraid the old saying is true when it comes to art. Have a lovely week. Bye everyone.